Hello, creative friends. Megan here from the Cannon Beach Arts Association. I'm really excited today to teach you about how to make your own paints. Using items from your own home, we're going to go through a few examples of how you can get creative this summer. A great way to get started is to take a look around and see if there's a corner or maybe a table that's not being used or a special place in your home that you can use to make your art. There are lots of creative ways to make paint at home. First, we're going to start with using food coloring. Here you see I have food coloring that comes in a powder form, but liquid would be okay too. There are lots of things in your kitchen that you might be able to use for paint. Don't forget to ask for permission too. With our food coloring, we're going to add a base and start with talcum powder that you see here, or baby powder. Next, we'll add Elmer's glue. What I had at home was clear, but you can use the kind that comes in a white bottle too. Now let's add a little bit of water. We want your base for your paint to be a little bit smooth so that it can be easily applied to paper. You can check this by seeing if your mix drips off of your spoon or mixing stick. Look at that! You've made your first mix that you will put with your food coloring. This version will act a little bit like finger paints do. Next, we're going to create a different base using items from the kitchen. Here I added about 2 tablespoons of gluten-free flour, because that's what I had in my kitchen, and about 1 tablespoon of salt. Let's add a little bit of warm water so that we can mix. You can always add a little bit more water if you need to, and as you keep stirring to help get the clumps of the flour out, remember, you want your base to be a little bit runny off of your stirring stick or spoon. For all the guardians and parents out there, this version with the flour and salt is edible in case it gets into little mouths while you're making. And it's going to make your paint a little bit thicker, almost like a chalky substance when you add it to the food coloring. Now you have 2 bases to add to your colors. One made out of baby powder and glue. We're going to add it to each of our 3 primary colors. Do any of my creative friends out there know what the 3 primary colors of the color wheel are? You guessed it! Yellow, blue, and red that you see here. Did you know that you can mix these colors with each other to create brand new colors of the rainbow for yourself? We'll practice that a little bit later in some other videos. Now let's try our flour and salt mix that we made. We'll add these to our 3 primary colors that we just learned about. Remember, this version might need a little bit extra mixing because of the clumps that are in the flour. Don't forget to use your muscles. Look at that! Do you notice any differences in the color as I mix the paint? This is exciting. It's time to test out my paint. I grabbed 2 of my paintbrushes that I had on my desk. Some of you at home might not have any paintbrushes, so what are some creative things that you could use, maybe even from your yard, to paint with? I'm also grabbing some paper. Here I had some watercolor from a pad, as well as some computer paper that I cut up into some smaller sheets, and even some recycled paper that I received from a package in the mail. What paper or recycled materials do you have around your house that you could use to paint on? Time to test out the paints. I'm using watercolor paper here, and starting with the glue and baby powder paint. Next, I'm going to test out the paint made with salt and flour and water. Can you see here where it's a little bit thicker? The top 3 lines are the paint that's kind of like finger paint. It can be great for sensory play and hands-on making. And the bottom here is the chalky paint. I like to store my paints in little glass jars so that I can keep using them. Remember, your paints from kitchen items will probably only last a day or 2. Now we're going to try another option for making paint. This one's pretty simple. It just takes 2 ingredients. You're going to need some hot water, either from your microwave or faucet, but remember, be careful and get some help if you need it. If you have some old crayons around your house that are in tiny pieces, you can use them for your paint. Carefully mix your hot water and crayon quickly to create a thick paint. I like to use a sponge brush or an old paintbrush when working with my wax paint. Wax can dry, harden, and make it hard to clean your paintbrush. First, I'm trying the hot wax paint on computer paper to see what will happen. It goes through a little bit and you can see the wax. Next, I'm trying it on a little bit thicker watercolor paper. What do you notice about the difference in paper? For our next homemade paint, it may be helpful to have a few jars or containers. You'll also need some water. Any temperature is fine. And for this first technique, I took an old marker that was getting kind of dried up and placed it in the water with the jar. Let's see what happens. Next, I found a ballpoint pen with black ink on my desk and carefully took it apart. Remember, these can come with ink spilling out pretty quickly, so you may want to ask a parent or guardian or friend to help take this apart. Put it in your water, we'll see what happens. Some of you might have some old school or art supplies around the house. This is an old watercolor palette that I had. I took out one of the circles and I'm adding it to the water. I've let my colorful water jar sit for a couple of minutes. Let's check on our purple marker and see what kind of paint it's created. Now let's try out the blue watercolor. Now for the experiment with the pen ink. Let's see what kind of paint it's created. Use your imagination and see what other items you can find around the house to make new colors. For this homemade paint, I decided to go exploring in my kitchen. I found some bright yellow turmeric spice, as well as cinnamon. It smells so good. And some ground coffee. Don't forget to add a little bit of room temperature water to each glass. I'm going to be curious and experiment so I can see what colors these make. These are natural edible materials, so a lot like the flour, we're going to have to mix really well. If you use jars with lids, here I'm using recycled baby food jars. You can put the lids on and shake, shake, shake to get a little bit more of a mixture. Starting with the cinnamon, what color does it create? Now for the coffee grounds. This one looks like it's going to be a little bit darker. And finally, the turmeric spice, a very bright color. What else could you create from your kitchen? It looks like our kitchen materials created some really beautiful earth tone colors. A rainbow of colors, all made with homemade paints. Thanks for joining me today to make something special, and don't forget to share your creation. What will you be painting with your homemade paints?